15 years ago, I signed a death certificate that set a killer free because I was too tired to look 1 minute longer. Today, that killer sits at my daughter's dinner table. He calls me sir. He kisses her forehead every morning, and every night at 11 o'clock, he unlocks a kitchen drawer and measures half a teaspoon of white powder into the smoothie my daughter and my 8-year-old grandson will drink for breakfast. I spent 35 years reading the dead, so I know exactly what those white lines on her fingernails mean. He thinks I'm just a lonely old man who waters roses. He has no idea what I used to do for a living, and no idea what I'm about to do to him. This is male revenge. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, the man who called me sir is going to wish he never sat at my table. 15 years ago, I signed a death certificate that set a killer free because I was too tired to look 1 minute longer. That killer now sits at my daughter's dinner table. He calls me sir. He kisses his wife's forehead every morning, and every night at 11 o'clock, he quietly unlocks a kitchen drawer and measures half a teaspoon of white powder into the smoothie my daughter and my 8-year-old grandson will share for breakfast. In 40 years of being her father, I have never once told my daughter I love her. And now 35 years of reading the dead are telling me that if I do not act, I will lose her before I ever get the chance to say it. My name is Walter Pennington. I am 68 years old. For 35 years, I was chief forensic pathologist for Harris County, Texas. 312 autopsies a year at my peak. I spent my whole life learning to see what other people miss on a body. I never imagined the body I would have to read would be my own daughter's, while she was still alive, smiling, pouring my coffee. But I need to start before all of that. Before the locked drawer. Before the white powder. Before the man who calls me sir. Because the morning it began, I was doing what I do every morning now. I was watering a dead woman's roses. Catherine planted them. My wife. 4 years gone, and I still keep her garden alive, because letting the roses die feels too much like letting her die a second time. I talk to her photograph every night, not because I believe in ghosts, because 40 years of sharing every thought with one person carves a groove in your brain that death cannot fill. The words come whether she is listening or not. Beside her photo sits a jewelry box. Dark oak, brass hinges. Catherine left it with a sticky note in her shaking hand during those final weeks. For Meredith, only open when she truly needs her mother. I gave it to my daughter after the funeral. As far as I know, she has never opened it. I understand that. Grief makes you avoid the things that carry the weight of the person you lost. Catherine's dresses still hang in our dark closet, holding the shape of a woman who no longer wears them. And I have not touched them in 4 years. Meredith, my daughter, 40 years old, an English teacher in Austin, married to a man named Craig, mother of twin boys. She calls once a week, Sunday evenings, and the conversation lasts exactly 12 minutes. I know, because the kitchen clock sits in my line of sight while I hold the phone. 12 minutes to cover the weather, the boys, school, and a polite question about my health that never waits for the answer. 12 minutes is the distance between a daughter who loves her father and a daughter who no longer knows how to be in the same room with him. I understand why. 35 years of pathology made me the kind of father who announced the survival temperature of bacteria in undercooked beef while everyone else tried to enjoy the pot roast. When her friends asked what her father did, she said, "Doctor, just doctor." She left out the part about the dead people. I had never told her I loved her. Not once in 40 years. Not because the feeling was absent, because my generation showed love through provision. You paid the bills. You fixed what was broken. I paid off her college without $1 of debt and thought that was enough. Catherine had tried to warn me. She needs to hear you say it. Walter. But Catherine was the translator between us. And when the translator died, the two of us discovered we had been speaking different languages all along. That morning, my phone buzzed on the porch railing. Meredith. A text. I almost dropped the coffee mug reaching for it. Because she almost never reached out first. "Dad, come to Austin for dinner Friday. Craig is cooking. The boys miss you." I read it 3 times the way I read a tissue sample, searching for the thing that does not belong, and something did not belong. The phrasing was too smooth, too warm. My daughter, who timed our calls to 12 minutes, did not write the boys miss you. That was not her voice. It was as if someone had stood behind her shoulder and helped her find the kindest possible words. I told myself I was a lonely old man inventing meaning out of a simple invitation. I know now that I was right. I just had the reason backwards. It was not love that made that message so warm. It was bait. The man who would call me sir at the door had already decided he wanted me close enough to watch, close enough to manage, close enough to use as a witness to how devoted a husband he was. He was inviting the one person in the world who could read the truth on his wife's body. Because he was that confident I would never see it. I typed back, "I would love to. See you Friday. 3 hours on Interstate 35. That was the distance between my loneliness and the possibility of something better. I shut off the hose, walked inside, and packed a bag. The roses would survive one morning without me. They always did. They were stronger than I gave them credit for. I wondered, just for a second, whether the same was true of my daughter. In 1 week, I would know exactly how wrong that question was. In 1 week, I would be sitting at her table, watching her hand shake as she poured my coffee, and I would understand that the man cooking dinner was not feeding my family. He was thinning the herd. The drive to Austin took 3 hours and 14 minutes, and I spent every one of them coaching myself to be a normal father. Do not mention bacteria. Do not study anyone's skin under the dining room light. Do not, under any circumstances, say the word pathology at the table. 3 hours of teaching an old dog to sit. Craig opened the door before I knocked, as if he had been watching the street. "Sir, come in. The boys haven't stopped asking about you." He gripped my hand, warm, firm, practiced. He had called me sir since the day Meredith introduced us 3 years ago, and it had never once sounded forced. Some men use sir as a wall. Craig used it like a handshake, and he held the door wide. The way a man holds a door when he wants you to see everything inside. Owen hit me at waist level before I cleared the doorway. Grandpa. His arms wrapped around me with the desperate strength of a boy counting the hours. Noah waved from the sofa without looking up from a book about dinosaurs. My boys. Twins. Different as weather and stone. I loved them with a ferocity that frightened me. Then Meredith came out of the kitchen, and my trained eye betrayed me before I could stop it. She was thinner than last month. The hollows under her cheekbones were deeper, throwing little shadows that had not been there at Easter. Her skin carried a pallor most people would blame on indoor living. But I had spent 3 decades learning the difference between healthy pale and sick pale. This was the second kind. She hugged me. Her arms felt lighter, her shoulder blades sharper against my palms. Dad, you made it. Wouldn't miss it, I said, and held her a beat too long. A woman I had not met stepped into the hallway carrying a tall glass of something green and thick. Late 30s, dark hair pulled back, medical scrubs. Here you go, Meredith, your afternoon supplement. Turmeric, spirulina, and iron. You'll feel the difference by next week. My daughter drank it straight down. That's Denise Palmer, Craig said at my shoulder. Private wellness nurse. Meredith's been fighting chronic fatigue, so her doctor recommended nutritional support. He said it the way you describe a kitchen remodel, already handled. And then he added, just for me, with a sad little smile. I'm so glad you're here to see how hard we're working on her. It means a lot, having family witness it. The words sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. Most husbands do not narrate their devotion. Craig was building an audience, and he had chosen me, the one man at that table who could read a body, to sit in the front row. Dinner was roasted chicken. Craig had cooked himself. He served Meredith first, cutting her chicken into smaller pieces without being asked, then kissed her hair. Eat slow, babe. He refilled glasses before they emptied, laughed at the right moments, touched her hand with a tenderness that looked like love and smelled faintly, like rehearsal. Then Meredith poured my coffee, and her hand trembled. The stream wobbled, tracing a jagged line from pot to cup. Not the tremor of cold or nerves. I had seen this tremor before, on autopsy tables, in photographs of poisoning victims whose nervous systems had been quietly dismantled over weeks. Peripheral neuropathy, the kind that starts in the fingertips and works inward, the kind caused by arsenic accumulating faster than the body can flush it. My eyes dropped to her fingernails, and I saw it. I begged my brain to unsee it. But 35 years of pattern recognition does not come with an off switch, and the white horizontal bands across her nail beds were as legible to me as words on a page. Mace lines. I had documented them on more than 40 cadavers. Every single one had been poisoned. I slid my phone under the table, angled it, pressed the shutter 3 times while pretending to check a message. 3 secret photographs of my daughter's fingernails, taken at her own table because the man across from me, the one who cut her chicken into little pieces, was either the most devoted husband in Texas or something I did not yet have the courage to name. Then Owen tugged my sleeve. Grandpa, is Mama sick? She shakes a lot. How come she shakes so much? The table went quiet. Craig answered with practiced calm. Mama's just tired, buddy. The doctor's helping. And then he said the thing that turned the food cold in my stomach. He smiled gently. It'll get a little worse before it gets better. The body always gets worse before the medicine catches up. That's normal. It'll get worse before it gets better. He said it like a weather report, like a man reading from a chart he had already seen. Most husbands hope. They cling to good days and pray the bad ones are behind them. Craig was not hoping. He was forecasting. He knew the trajectory to the week because somewhere in this house, he was the one steering it. I looked at my grandson then. Really looked. And the cold spread. Because Owen was pale too, a shade grayer than his brother. And both of them, mother and son, drank from the same glasses every morning of their lives. I smiled at the boy and told him his mother would be just fine. It was the first lie I told that house. It would not be the last. By the time I reached my car that night, I was not driving home to sleep. I was driving home to prove I was wrong and praying with everything left in me that I was. Because if I was right, then I had not been invited to dinner. I had been invited to watch. I made it as far as a gas station outside Temple before my hands started shaking too hard to drive. 9:47 at night, 112 miles of empty highway behind me, and I could not remember a single one of them. My hands had driven. My mind had been looping the same three things: the tremor in Meredith's wrist, the white bands on her nails, and the gray under my grandson's skin. I was sitting there with the engine running when my phone lit up. Craig, drove safe. Sir, meant to ask you got real quiet at dinner. Everything all right? We worry about you out there alone. I read it 4 times. To anyone else, it was a kind message from a thoughtful son-in-law. But I had spent 35 years reading what people say against what they are doing. And this was not concern. This was a probe. He had watched me go quiet at the table, watched my eyes drop to his wife's hands, and now he was checking the perimeter. You got real quiet. He was not worried about my drive. He was measuring how much I had seen. I typed back, long drive tires an old man. Wonderful dinner. Thank you for taking such good care of her. 3 dots appeared. Then that's all we want. To take care of her. Good night, sir. I set the phone down and understood that the war had already started, and that I had just fired my first shot a lie, dressed as gratitude. He thought he was managing a lonely old man. I let him keep thinking it. In our world, the most dangerous thing you can be is underestimated by the man you are hunting. I drove the last 90 minutes white-knuckled and dry-eyed. When I got home, I stood in front of Catherine's photograph and let her smile mock me with its permanence. Catherine, I said, I see something wrong with our daughter. The way you used to kick me under the table for. But this time it isn't a stranger's pupils at a fundraiser. It's arsenic lines on Meredith's fingernails. And the gray is in Owen now, too. If I'm right, someone in that house is poisoning both of them. If I'm wrong, I lose her forever. Tell me what to do. The photograph did not answer. But after 40 years, you can generate a person's voice from memory, like a song you have heard 10,000 times. You're always right about the medicine, Walter, and always wrong about the delivery. So this time don't deliver. Prove. 3 years ago, I forgot that lesson. At a school fundraiser, I told Meredith one of her colleagues had a neurological problem, just from his walk. She pulled the car onto the shoulder and said, "You cannot look at a living human being without dissecting him." She did not speak to me for 6 months. Catherine rebuilt that bridge plank by plank. Catherine was dead now. There was no one left to rebuild anything. If I was wrong this time, the silence would be permanent. But I opened the photographs from under the table anyway. 3 blurred images. White horizontal bands across the nail bed of my daughter's right index finger. In 35 years, I had never once seen mace lines caused by anything but heavy metal poisoning. They were not ambiguous. They were the body's written confession. I dialed Evelyn Marsh. She answered on the 3rd ring. Sharp and awake the way retired forensic people always answer a late call. Because in our world, a late call means someone is dead. I gave it to her in clinical sequence. Peripheral tremor consistent with arsenic neuropathy. Mace lines indicating chronic exposure. Progressive weight loss and pallor over 3 to 5 months. Then I told her about the boy, and about a husband who already knew the disease would get worse before it got better. Evelyn was quiet for 5 seconds. In our profession, 5 seconds of silence means a person is running differentials, eliminating them one by one. Then she said the sentence that broke something loose in me. "Oh, Walter, if this were any patient on earth other than your daughter, you'd have called the police an hour ago. Don't let love make you slower than science." She was right. A stranger's fingernails at a conference. I'd have flagged in seconds. But Meredith was the girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to name all 206 bones in the body as a bedtime story. "I need hair and urine," I said. "Off the books. Can you run the toxicology? Send them priority, 72 hours. She paused. "And Walter, there are cases I wish I had looked at more carefully. Don't let this become one of them." The line went dead, and her words landed somewhere deeper than she knew. 'Cause I had a case like that too. I just had not remembered it yet, 15 years ago, on a tired Tuesday afternoon in Galveston. I signed a name to a conclusion in under a minute, and I never thought about it again. But that name had not forgotten me. It was already moving toward this house, toward this daughter, like a debt that had been collecting interest in the dark, and the man who carried it had just texted me good night. I did not sleep. I sat in Catherine's empty chair until the sky turned the color of old ash, planning how to walk back into a poisoner's home and steal the proof off my own daughter's body. The roses outside needed water. They would have to wait. I had a different kind of garden to tend now, the kind that grows only in the dark. I went back the following Saturday with a purpose I disguised as love. I brought flowers for Meredith, a dinosaur book for Noah, a model rocket for Owen. The gifts were real. The reason was not. Tucked beneath my clothes in the overnight bag were 2 sterile evidence bags I had kept from my years at the morgue hospital-grade polyethylene. Tamper seals, chain of custody labels down the side. The tools of my old life smuggled into my daughter's home like contraband. Craig met me at the door again. "Sir, 2 weekends in a row." He smiled, but his eyes did the thing I had been waiting for, a quick flick, up and down, the red of a man checking whether I had brought anything I shouldn't. "Meredith will be thrilled." Couldn't stay away from those boys," I said, and let him take the bag from my hand. I let him feel its weight. Let him decide it held nothing but an old man's shirts. The most dangerous thing I owned in that house was his certainty that I was harmless. Lunch was sandwiches on the back patio. Craig made them all. Turkey and avocado for Meredith. Extra avocado. Babe healthy fats. The doctor said it helps absorption. Absorption. The word a man uses when he wants something to move efficiently through a body. I ate my sandwich and counted the seconds between his gestures of care, each one perfectly timed, and could no longer tell whether I was watching a husband or a metronome. Owen sat against my arm, boneless and warm, the way children lean when they trust you completely. He ate half his sandwich, put it down, and rested his head on my shoulder. "Grandpa, I'm so sleepy." "Is that normal? I'm sleepy all the time now." "Mama's sleepy too." "Are we sick the same way?" My stomach dropped. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were glassy, the lids heavy at 1 in the afternoon. His skin carried that gray undertone I had cataloged on 300 bodies a year. Across the table, Noah was bright, animated, vibrating with the energy his twin no longer had. And the difference between the brothers was a diagnosis in itself. Owen shared the morning smoothie with his mother. Noah ate cereal alone. Same house, same kitchen. 2 boys. Only the one who drank from his mother's glass was going gray. "How long, buddy?" I asked, keeping it light. "How long have you been so sleepy?" "A few weeks, maybe." He yawned into my sleeve. "Mama says it's because we're growing." I excused myself to the bathroom. Walked past the wedding photo in the hall, Craig and Meredith under an arch of white flowers, both of them smiling, and locked the door behind me. Meredith's hairbrush sat on the vanity. Dark strands woven through the bristles, far more than a healthy 40-year-old should be shedding. I pulled 6 roots intact and sealed them in the first bag. Sample A, hair, M, Hollowell. My handwriting was steady. My hand was not. The second sample was harder. The boys' bathroom across the hall. Owen had used it before lunch and, being a boy, had not flushed. I knelt beside the bowl with the second bag and collected what I needed. Sample B. Urine. O. Hollowell. I washed my hands twice and stared at the old man in the mirror, 68 years old, kneeling beside his grandson's toilet, building a forensic case against the man cutting his daughter's chicken 20 feet away. This was what I had become, or maybe what I had always been, and retirement had just been a costume over a uniform that never came off. When I came back out, Craig was standing in the hallway, not by the patio, in the hallway, between me and the bathrooms. He had a dish towel over one shoulder and an easy smile. "You feeling okay, sir? You were in there a while?" His tone was gentle. His eyes were not. They moved, just once, to my hands checking. I realized whether I was carrying anything out. "Old plumbing, old man," I said, and patted his shoulder as I passed. Some things take longer than they used to. He laughed, but he did not move until I was past him. And I felt his gaze on my back the whole way down the hall. He had not followed me by accident. He had been counting my minutes, the way I had counted his gestures. We were both keeping time on each other now. I drove home that afternoon with 2 evidence bags in my luggage, a few strands of hair, a few milliliters of liquid. They weighed almost nothing. The moral weight was something else. I pulled onto the shoulder of I-35 twice, not from traffic, but because my hands would not stop, and I could not see the road through what was rising in my eyes. I mailed the samples to Evelyn by priority courier on Monday morning. Then I waited. 72 hours. I watered Catherine's roses each dawn and talked to her each night and counted the minutes the way I used to count slides under a microscope, knowing that whatever came back would either save my family or end my place in it, and that there was no version of the truth that left me whole. On Wednesday, while I was rinsing my coffee mug and watching a cardinal on the back fence, the phone rang. Evelyn, and I knew. Before she said a word, from the register of her voice, the low, careful tone she saved for the families of the dead, I picked up on the first ring. Evelyn never wasted words, and tonight she used the third of her 3 voices. The first was clinical blunt force trauma, next case. The second was the bright hum of a hard puzzle. The third was low, careful, slow. The one she saved for the families of the dead. She used the third one now. To Walter, I ran the samples twice. Full heavy metal panel, mass spectrometry, cross-referenced with gas chromatography. A pause, and a rustle of paper. Meredith's hair shows arsenic at 4 times the normal threshold. The distribution along the shaft means chronic exposure 3 to 5 months. Steady. Owen's urine is at 1.5 times normal. Lower. Consistent with a secondary victim sharing a food source, not a primary target. Another pause. Walter. Someone is poisoning both of them. I sat down. Not by choice, my legs simply decided they were finished, and the kitchen chair caught me. The cardinal was still on the fence. The coffee mug was still in the sink. The world looked exactly as it had 10 seconds ago, except now it was a world with arsenic in my daughter and my grandson, and a hand that put it there on purpose. I had known. Since the dinner table, some part of me had known. But knowing and hearing the number are different animals. Knowing is suspicion with an escape hatch, a maybe you can lie down with at night. Hearing 4 times normal is a door slamming shut. There is no maybe left. There is only the number, and what the number means. The pattern is controlled. Evelyn went on, steady because one of us had to be. Small doses over a long stretch, enough to cause steady decline without an acute crisis that would send a doctor looking for metals. Accidental exposure is irregular spikes and gaps. This is consistent, methodical. Whoever is doing this understands dosing curves. And in my ear, layered over her voice. I heard Craig at the dinner table, calm as a weatherman. It'll get worse before it gets better. He had not been comforting his wife. He had been reading me his schedule. Who controls their food? Evelyn asked, though I think she already knew. Craig. He prepares everything. He makes the smoothie every morning, the one Meredith and Owen share. There's a nurse, too. Denise Palmer. Herbal blends. Supplements. Either one has access. I closed my eyes. But I've watched him. Evelyn. Late at night. A locked drawer. A white powder. He measures it. She was quiet a moment. Then she said the thing that turned my grief into a plan. You have biological evidence of poisoning. You do not have legal evidence of who. Hair proves exposure, not the hand. If you go to the police now, they open a case Craig will see coming. He stops. Her symptoms stabilize. Doctors call it recovery. And 3 months later, when everyone looks away, he starts again. I have watched that pattern empty more than one grave. So what do? You go back. You observe. You document. You build a case that gives him no room to move, and you do it without telling Meredith. Because if she confronts him while he knows he's being watched, he does one of two things. He runs, or he speeds up and finishes her before you can finish him. You're asking me to spy on my own daughter's home. I'm asking you to save your daughter's life, she said. That's what the numbers say is at stake. Not a marriage, not the money, her life, and the boys. I hung up and sat without moving for the better part of an hour. The stripe of afternoon sun crawled across the floor, from the table leg to the refrigerator, while I understood, truly understood, for the first time that the man who called me sir, who carried Owen on his shoulders and kissed Meredith's hair and cut her chicken into little pieces, was killing them both. Slowly, patiently, with the precision of a man who had done this before, or studied someone who had. 35 years on the table taught me one thing about poisoners that I have never been able to unlearn. They are patient because they are confident. They are confident because they are invisible, and they are invisible because the people they are killing love them. Meredith loved Craig. Owen called him Dad. And love is the finest camouflage a murderer can wear, because no one autopsies the man who holds your hand in the emergency room while he measures your dose for the morning. I picked up the phone and texted Evelyn, I'll go back this weekend. I'll watch. I'll build it. I won't tell her until belief isn't optional. Her reply came in under a minute. Good. And Walter, be careful. The most dangerous moment in any poisoning case is the moment the poisoner realizes someone is watching. I set the phone down and looked across the room at Catherine's photograph. 4 times normal, I told her. Our daughter, and the boy's already at 1.5, and the man who did it is going to sit across from me this weekend and call me sir and ask about my back. And I'm going to smile and thank him and eat whatever he puts on my plate. I waited for the voice from memory. For once, it did not come. Even she had no comfort for this. The roses outside needed water. I did not move. Somewhere 90 miles north, a man was checking his wife's bank balance in the dark, and I did not yet know that part. But I would. By the weekend, I would know all of it. I went back that weekend the way a surgeon walks into an operating theater. Every gesture rehearsed, every reaction preset. I was not visiting my daughter. I was conducting a forensic observation of a live crime scene. And the most dangerous variable in the room was my own face. If Craig read suspicion in my eyes for even half a second, the case died, and my daughter died with it. He had invited me to stay the night. It's a long drive in the dark, sir. The guest room's made up. Meredith would love to have you for breakfast. Hospitality as a trap, baited with kindness. I accepted, because proximity was evidence, and evidence was the only thing keeping her alive. Dinner passed, salmon, plated like a photograph by a man who watched cooking shows and practiced. Meredith ate half and pushed the rest around, thinner than last week. The shadows under her eyes had deepened past what makeup could hide. Owen ate beside her, matching her exhaustion bite for bite, his fork drooping as if gravity had singled him out. Noah asked for seconds and vibrated with the energy his twin no longer owned. The contrast between the brothers was a diagnosis I could not stop reading. After dinner, I played cards on the floor with Owen until he fell asleep mid-game, a 7 of hearts still in his hand. I carried him to bed and felt the wire of his ribs through his shirt thinner than a boy that age should be. That weight, a sleeping child trusting you to hold him, is the kind of evidence no laboratory can measure and no court will admit. But it is the evidence that makes a man willing to burn everything else down to keep it safe. 11-14. The house went dark. I lay on the guest bed fully dressed, shoes on, and listened. At 11:19, footsteps. Soft on the hardwood. The kitchen. I opened my door 2 inches. Craig stood at the counter in a t-shirt, lit by the little bulb over the stove. He reached into the cabinet above the refrigerator, behind a row of cereal boxes, and produced a small key. He knelt and unlocked the bottom drawer beside the dishwasher, the only drawer in that kitchen with a keyhole. From it, he lifted a small container, no label. He unscrewed the lid, tilted it over the blender, and tapped twice with his index finger. A fine white powder fell, roughly half a teaspoon. He capped the container, returned it, locked the drawer, slid the key back behind the cereal, and added fruit, yogurt, spinach. He sealed the blender and set it in the refrigerator for morning. 90 seconds. Start to finish. No fumbling. No glance over his shoulder. No tremor of guilt. He did it the way a man brushes his teeth from muscle memory built over months of repetition. I stood in that doorway with my heartbeat in my ears and my nails cutting crescents into my palms. Every cell in me wanted to cross that kitchen and put him against the refrigerator and ask what was in the jar. 35 years of discipline held me in place. Emotion destroys evidence. Confrontation without documentation just hands the guilty man his alibi. I had watched 100 cases collapse because someone chose fury over procedure. I would not make my daughter the 101st. Craig killed the stove light and walked back toward the bedroom. On the way, he paused at the boy's door, opened it, looked in for 3 seconds, closed it gently. The gesture of a loving father, checking on sleeping children performed by the man who had just measured their mourning. I should have gone to bed. I did not. At 2 in the morning, I crept to the master bedroom door, left ajar, and looked through the gap. Craig lay on his back. Meredith slept beside him, turned away. As I watched, he reached over without opening his eyes, lifted her phone from the nightstand, and entered her passcode with the fluency of a man who had memorized it long ago. He opened a banking app, scrolled, stopped on a balance I could not read from the hall, but already knew from my own quiet research roughly $1.1 million. The inheritance from Catherine's mother. He took a screenshot, set the phone back, and then he reached across the pillow and stroked Meredith's hair. Once, gently, the way you might pet an animal you intend to sell. I stood there until my legs ached, watching a man alternate between checking his wife's bank balance and stroking her hair. Tenderness and theft woven together so seamlessly that if I had not spent my life separating performance from truth, I might have mistaken it for love. I went back to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed, pressing my palms flat against my thighs to stop the shaking. Not fear. The specific rage that has nowhere to go, because letting it out would cost more than holding it in, and so you swallow it. And it goes down like glass. Then my phone lit the dark. A text. Craig, saw your light on, sir. Can't sleep either. Funny feels like neither of us can lately. I looked at the strip of hallway under my door. His bedroom light was off. He had not seen my light from his room. He had walked the hall in the dark and seen it under my door, which meant that still I had been watching him. He had circled back and stood outside my room and watched me. We were not hunter and prey anymore. We were two men in a dark house, each one certain he was the one doing the watching. And only one of us was right. Morning came the way it comes when you have not slept, not gradually, but all at once. A switch flipped, the light through the curtains shifting from black to gray to the pale gold of an Austin Saturday. I had been awake all night with Craig's text glowing in my mind. Saw your light on. He knew I had been up. The only question was how much he thought I had seen. He was already in the kitchen when I came out, showered and combed, pouring coffee from a French press with the precision of a man who understood that presentation matters even at 7 in the morning. Sir, good morning. Hope you slept. He slid a mug across the island. Cream's in the fridge. Meredith's still resting. I let her sleep. I took the mug. The coffee was excellent. I drank it 3 feet from a man who had measured poison into a blender 8 hours earlier. And the space between us felt both enormous and non-existent because I knew what he was. And he did not yet know how much I knew. And that gap was the only weapon I had. He leaned against the counter, relaxed, weight on one hip. Can I tell you something, sir? I worry about her. The fatigue is getting worse. The doctor says stress, maybe hormones, but I'm not satisfied. I've been reading everything deficiency syndromes, autoimmune, environmental factors. He rubbed the back of his neck, the universal gesture of a burdened man. I keep thinking I'm missing something. Every note was tuned. The furrowed brow, the dip into concern at the word specialist. If I had not watched him tap that powder, I would have believed every syllable. That was the part that turned my stomach. Not his cruelty, his craftsmanship. So I tested him. I kept my voice mild, an old doctor musing aloud. Have you considered an environmental toxicology panel? Older homes, lead in the pipes, residue in the soil. It might even explain why Owen's tired too if it's something they're both taking in. Toxicology. I watched for the tell. Most people would not flinch. A man secretly poisoning his family would register that word differently, a fractional tightening of the jaw, a half-second delay, the involuntary widening of the pupils when the brain meets a threat word inside a safe conversation. Craig showed nothing, not a flicker. He nodded, thoughtful, as if I had handed him a gift. That's a great point, sir. Environmental. Could be the water. Could be the HVAC. Then he smiled and turned the blade around so smoothly I almost missed it. You know, it's a relief, having a man with your training in the house. You see things the rest of us miss. A beat. I'd hate for you to wear yourself out, though, looking so hard. At your age, in a strange bed, a mind can start seeing patterns that aren't there. Happened to my own father at the end. There it was. He had not flinched at toxicology. He had answered it by reaching into the dark and laying the first brick of the story he would tell later. The old man is slipping. He sees things that aren't there. He was not defending himself. He was building my reputation as a paranoid before I ever opened my mouth. I had seen it 100 times in abuse cases. The predator tells the world the victim is crazy before the victim can tell anyone the predator is dangerous. And it works. Because the first story is the one people believe. Meredith came down at 8:30, holding the rail. Craig poured her smoothie from the blender he had loaded at 11:19 the night before. Added a straw, carried it over. Mornings, babe. Extra spinach today. He sat and rubbed her back in slow circles while she drank. Owen appeared, yawning, and Craig poured a smaller glass. Here you go, buddy. Growing boys need their greens. I watched my grandson drink from the same blender I had watched him fill in the dark. I watched my daughter finish hers and hand back the glass with a tired smile. I watched Craig rinse both at the sink, humming, erasing the evidence with tap water before my eyes, and I understood that this kitchen was a crime scene. The blender was the weapon. The locked drawer was the magazine, and the victims were thanking their killer for breakfast. Owen wandered to me. Grandpa, will you stay? Mom said you might go today. His eyes were glassy again. 9 hours of sleep and tired at 8:45. I'll come back, I said. I promise. He hugged me, and I felt those ribs again. And I made that promise with every year I had left. Craig walked me to my car. At the door, he put a hand on my shoulder, warm, fatherly. Drive safe, sir, and don't you worry about us. A pause. His eyes steady on mine. We've got everything here under control. Everything under control. He meant it as comfort. I heard it as what it was, a man telling the only person who could stop him that there was nothing to stop. He had taken my measure in the dark and decided I was harmless. a tired old widower who saw patterns that weren't there. I let him keep believing it. I shook his hand, thanked him for his hospitality, and drove south on I-35 carrying everything I had seen and nothing I could yet prove. The distance between seeing and proving felt like the distance between life and death, and for Meredith and Owen, that is exactly what it was. I had until they reached the number that killed before me. I just did not yet know whose grave already held the proof. I spent 4 days writing what I would say. Drafts on legal pads, crossed out and rewritten. Rehearsed in the bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning with the shower running so I could judge my own voice through the steam. Every version failed. There is no script for telling your daughter that her husband is poisoning her. There is no arrangement of words that makes that sentence sound like medicine instead of madness. So I settled on the only language Meredith had ever trusted more than mine. The clinical one. Present the evidence. Let the science speak where the father never could. Evelyn had told me not to. Do not tell her. Walter, if she confronts him while he's watching, he runs, or he speeds up. I knew she was right. I drove to Austin anyway, unannounced, on a Tuesday morning, because the number 4 times normal does not let a father sit still and wait. I still had a key from the year I helped with their renovations. Meredith taught until noon on Tuesdays. The boys were at school. Craig was at his office in the Domain. Denise came Thursdays. The house would be empty, except it wasn't. Meredith had stayed home, too tired to teach. She opened the door and blinked at me. "Dad, you didn't call. I was in the area," I lied. "Can I come in?" We sat in a living room that smelled of lemon polish. I started the way I had rehearsed, gently, clinically. "Meredith, I've noticed some things about your health. Not as an overprotective father, as someone with medical training who recognizes patterns. Your hands. The tremor. There are lines on your fingernails, Mies lines that point to heavy metal exposure. Owen shows the same fatigue. I believe something toxic is getting into the food you two share." I watched her face move through 3 stages in 4 seconds. Confusion. Recognition. And then the thing I had seen only once before the day she told me she was done apologizing for my profession. She stood up. Her voice did not rise. It dropped. And cold is worse than loud. "You can't stop. You're retired. Dad, you're not a doctor anymore. You're a man who waters roses and talks to a photograph of his dead wife, and now you're standing in my living room calling my husband a poisoner. Because of my fingernails. The lab results. Lab results." She went still. "You took something from my house. You sent it to a lab." The silence was my confession. Oh my God. Craig said this would happen. There it was. The brick he had laid in the dark. 4 days early. Now bearing weight. He said losing Mom broke something in you. He said you'd start seeing pathology in everyone. Because it's all you know how to do. I defended you. And here you are, proving him right. He told you I'd do this. The sentence detonated quietly in my chest. Craig had not been guessing in that kitchen. He had been planting. He had told my daughter her father was slipping before her father ever spoke, so that when the truth finally came, it would arrive wearing the exact costume of the delusion he had described. The predator names the victim crazy first. The first story wins. "Where were you when Mom died?" Meredith said, and it landed like a fist. "You were in Houston, Watering her roses, Craig drove me to the hospital. Craig held my hand. Craig made the arrangements while you stood in a backyard with a garden hose. And now you walk in here and tell me he's killing me. The one who showed up. The one who stayed. She was right about the facts and catastrophically wrong about what they meant. And the gap between those two things was an ocean I could not cross with evidence or love. Yes, I had been in Houston. Yes, Craig had been present. But presence and poison are not opposites. The man who held her hand in the waiting room was also the man who held the drawer key at 11:19 at night. I could not say it, because saying it required her to demolish her entire world on the word of the Father she had already been taught to doubt. And no one tears down their whole life because an estranged old man asks them to. Then Craig walked in. He must have come home early or never left. He crossed the room with the calm of a man who had rehearsed this exact scene. Sir, gentle, weaponized. She needs rest, not pressure. I know you care, but this isn't helping. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into him, into the man who was killing her. And over her shoulder, he looked at me with an expression so perfectly built that even I, after 35 years of reading faces, could not tell whether it was sympathy or victory. I left. She did not walk me to the door. Craig closed it behind me. Softly, the softest a door can close, and somehow the gentleness was worse than a slam. A slam is honest. A soft close is performance. I sat in my car in their driveway and understood that I had just done the one thing Evelyn warned me never to do. I had shown my hand. Craig now knew I was hunting him, and a cornered poisoner does not slow down. That night my phone buzzed. Not Craig. A number I didn't know. You don't know me. But I think we're trying to stop the same man. My sister married him too. Her name was Laura. She's dead. The highway at night makes your thoughts louder. No scenery, no billboards. Nothing but the road and the engine and the inside of your own skull. And that night, my skull was a courtroom where I was prosecutor, defendant, and jury all at once. And every verdict got appealed at the next mile marker. Maybe Meredith was right. Maybe 5 years of retirement and 2 of widowhood had rotted the thing that once told clinical observation, apart from paranoia. Maybe the tremor was benign. Maybe the Mies lines were a zinc deficiency. Maybe the locked drawer held protein powder a vain man was embarrassed about. Maybe I had read too many bodies in too many dark rooms, and now every kitchen looked like a crime scene and every husband like a suspect. The doubt filled the car like exhaust, invisible, toxic, blurring the lane markers until I gripped the wheel just to feel something solid. I pulled into a rest area outside Round Rock and killed the engine. And then, before the doubt could finish drowning me, it broke against a single fact. 4 times normal. Numbers do not project. Numbers do not grieve. Numbers do not carry 35 years of professional damage. 4 times normal meant a hand. And a stranger's text was sitting in my phone, proving I was not the only one who had felt it. I called the number back. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been holding the phone. Mr. Pennington. Her voice was low, exhausted, the voice of someone who had said a true thing for years and been called crazy for it, a sound I had just learned from the inside. My name is Diane. Laura was my sister. She married Craig Hollowell in Austin, 4 months of fatigue, weakness, her hands shaking. The doctors called it an autoimmune thing they never could name. She died in 2021, 34 years old. No autopsy. He had her cremated before I could say a word. I closed my eyes. Fatigue, weakness, shaking hands. 4 months. A clinical trajectory I could have recited from the passenger seat. I filed a police report. Diane said. They investigated for 2 weeks and closed it. I sent a tip to the FBI's financial division. He collected $500,000 in life insurance 60 days after she died. Nothing. Everyone told me I was a grieving sister inventing a villain. A breath. Then a woman found me. 8 months ago. She said her daughter had just married him. She'd done her own digging. She believed me. A pause. Her name was Catherine. I had to pull the phone from my ear. The rest area swam. Catherine, I said. Walter Pennington. You knew her. She was my wife. My voice did not sound like mine. She died 2 years ago. Diane, she never told me any of this. The line was quiet a long moment. She told me she couldn't tell her husband. She said if she did, he'd tear the marriage apart trying to prove it, and her daughter would hate him for it, and choose Craig. She said she had to find another way. A pause. I think she was trying to protect both of you. And then she ran out of time. I sat in the dark with the engine ticking and understood that my dead wife had known. 8 months before the cancer took her. Catherine had stared at the same monster I was staring at now, and had chosen not to tell me because she knew exactly how I would handle it, and exactly how it would end. She had been right. I had walked into that house with my evidence, and my daughter had thrown me out and chosen Craig, just as Catherine foresaw. My phone buzzed against my cheek. A text, mid-call, from Evelyn. Then another. Then a third. Call me. Now. I told Diane I would call her back, and dialed. Evelyn answered before the first ring finished. Walter, Denise Palmer does not exist. No nursing license, no tax filings, no credit history before 2022. She materialized 2 years ago with a full identity and no past the way a fabricated one always looks. So I ran her face through the law enforcement database. A breath. 89% match. Her real name is Denise Hargrove. She married Craig Hollowell in San Antonio in 2013. Divorced 2016, except the property records show them at the same address for a year after. The divorce was on paper. They never actually separated. The car went cold around me. Every image I had of Denise reassembled itself. The green glass. The professional smile. The way she watched Meredith drink. Walter, Evelyn said quietly. The nurse caring for your daughter is your son-in-law's ex-wife, working under a false name. This isn't a husband with a poisoning habit. It's 2 people. It's a team. A team. A wife to administer the supplements on Thursdays. A husband to load the blender at night. A divorce filed on paper so that when the money came, they would not be visibly tied. I thought of Laura, dead and cremated before her sister could object. I thought of Catherine, doing this same math from a hospital bed, alone, deciding to spare me. And I thought of Meredith, asleep right now beside one of them, while the other planned to arrive on Thursday with a tall green glass and a smile surrounded. And certain she was safe, I started the car. I was done doubting. Two strangers in one night had told me the same thing my wife had died trying to tell me. And I would not be the third person to look at this man and decide I must be imagining it. Evelyn's office in the county medical examiner complex smelled the way it always had coffee, formaldehyde, and the particular staleness of a room where paper files outnumber the living. I had spent thousands of hours in rooms like this. The familiarity should have been a comfort. Instead, it felt like putting on a uniform I had tried to retire and finding it still fit perfectly, and hating that it did. She had printed everything and spread it across the desk, the way she once laid out autopsy photographs, chronological, deliberate. Each page set so I could read it, without turning my head. 40 years she had done this. She was very, very good at it. "Start here," she said. "Denise Hargrove, married Craig Hollowell, San Antonio, 2013. Divorced on paper in 2016, same address through 2017. Then she vanishes, no taxes, no credit, no trace. Until 2022 when she resurfaces as Denise Palmer, wellness nurse, with no history before that year. She moved to the next stack. Craig stays visible. The same year Denise disappears, 2017, he marries a woman named Laura in Austin. I felt the floor shift. Craig had a wife before Meredith. He never mentioned her. Neither did Meredith. I'd bet she doesn't know. Evelyn slid a death certificate across the desk. Laura Hollowell. Died 2021, age 34. Cause of death, cardiac failure secondary to chronic myocarditis. Attending physician was a general practitioner, not a cardiologist. No autopsy. No toxicology. Closed as natural. I read it with the eye of a man who had reviewed thousands of these and knew exactly where physicians cut corners and why. The diagnosis was plausible on paper, but the clinical notes told another story. Chronic fatigue over months, progressive weakness, peripheral neuropathy in the hands and feet, hair thinning, gastrointestinal distress. Same symptoms, Evelyn said, already nodding. Laura's trajectory matches Meredith's almost exactly. All written off as a vague autoimmune condition that was never named because the patient died before anyone could narrow it down. Arsenic, I said. Chronic arsenic presents as fatigue, neuropathy, hair loss, GI distress, and eventually cardiac failure. Myocarditis is the misdiagnosis it hides behind. Because the heart involvement at the end mimics inflammation, she pulled one more page. A life insurance policy. $500,000. Beneficiary. Craig Hollowell. Paid in full. 60 days after death. He killed her, I said. The words came out flat, clinical. Severed from the blast going off in my chest. Same method, same patience, same timeline. Evelyn's voice stayed level because one of us had to. Laura declined over about 5 months. Meredith's been declining 4. If he's running the same protocol and there's no reason to think he isn't your daughter, has 3 to 5 months before she reaches the dose that killed Laura. Call it 4 months. I did the arithmetic before I could stop myself. The way I had done 10,000 times. 90 to 150 days. The midpoint was 120. My daughter had 120 days. Diane's tip put Craig's name in the FBI's financial system. Evelyn went on. Not enough for a warrant. But if we bring them biological evidence of a second poisoning, same method, same man, they'll have their predicate. You're not looking at a husband who strayed. Walter, you're looking at a machine. He marries. He poisons over months. He collects. He moves on. Laura was not the prototype. There was someone before her. She turned her monitor toward me. I've been cross-referencing his aliases against our old Harris County database, and I found something that involves you. A pause I did not like. Galveston, 2009. A woman named Rebecca Aldridge. The screen showed a case file I had not opened in 15 years. And at the bottom of it, in my own handwriting, sharper than, the hand of a man in his early 50s who believed his instincts were infallible, a signature, and a conclusion. Rebecca Ann Aldridge. Cause of death, complications of undiagnosed type 2 diabetes. Manner of death, natural. Recommendation for further investigation, none. Daniel Aldridge, Evelyn said softly. Rebecca's husband. His social security number matches Craig Hollowell's earliest records. Same 9 digits. Different name. She let it sit. He collected $280,000 in life insurance. 30 days after she died. No investigation. Because the examining pathologist ruled it natural. Her eyes met mine. You signed it. Walter. I knew. I had known the instant I saw my own handwriting. I read Rebecca's clinical notes the way I should have read them in 2009. Progressive fatigue over 4 months. Peripheral neuropathy in both hands. Hair thinning. Chronic nausea. Pallor. 14 pounds lost in 12 weeks. Not diabetes. Diabetic ketoacidosis is acute. It does not carve Mies lines or thin a woman's hair over a season. What those notes described, what they had always described, was chronic arsenic poisoning. The exact picture I had read off Meredith's hands in 4 seconds at a dinner table. The same picture I had missed entirely in 2009 because I was tired. The caseload was crushing, and the next file was waiting. I could have caught him, I said, and my voice belonged to someone else. If I'd ordered 1 toxicology panel, 60 more seconds with that file. Daniel Aldridge goes to prison in 2009. He never becomes Craig, never marries Laura, never kills Laura, never meets my daughter. I stared at my signature. 3 women. 1 line of ink. I set this man loose with my own pen. Evelyn did not contradict me. She was too honest to absolve me and too kind to twist the knife. She only said, "Then you know exactly what's at stake if you sign the wrong conclusion twice." I looked at Rebecca's photograph clipped to the file. Young, dark-haired, smiling in a driver's license picture, alive. Somebody's daughter. Somebody's sister. Her sister had tried to tell the police. The police had listened the way I had listened, which is to say, not enough. I had a debt now that 15 years of watering roses could never pay. But Meredith was still breathing, And this time, there was no next file. There was only this one. Rebecca Aldridge was 31 years old when she died. I know, because I signed the document that said so. I signed it on a Tuesday afternoon in October of 2009 at the Harris County Satellite Office in Galveston. And I signed it the way I signed 300 others that year, fast, efficient. The next file already in my hand. Evelyn left me alone with the screen. The file had been digitized from paper, scanned in high resolution, every page preserved by a system designed so that nothing is ever truly lost. I read my own handwriting from 15 years ago, sharper then. The hand of a man in his early 50s who believed his instincts were infallible because they had never been tested against a failure he was willing to admit. Recommendation for further investigation: none. 7 words. I had written them in about 3 seconds. The pen moved on the way it always moved, and Rebecca Aldridge became a closed case. A line in a database no one would ever search again unless someone gave them a reason. It had taken 15 years and my own daughter's fingernails to give them one. I read the clinical notes the way I should have read them then, with the attention of a man who understands that rushing a conclusion is not efficiency. It is negligence wearing efficiency's coat. Progressive fatigue over 4 months. Peripheral neuropathy. Both hands. Hair thinning. Chronic nausea written off as a poor diet. Pallor. 14 pounds gone in 12 weeks. Each symptom was a brick, and together they built a wall around me with no door. These were not the signs of undiagnosed diabetes. Diabetic ketoacidosis arrives fast and loud. It does not carve Mies lines or thin a woman's hair across a season. What these notes described, what they had always described, was chronic arsenic poisoning. The same picture I had read off Meredith in 4 seconds. The same picture I had stood over in 2009 and waved through. Because I was tired and the next gurney was waiting. I thought about the things that had flowed from those 7 words like water from a cracked dam. Rebecca, buried without justice. Daniel Aldridge, walking out of Texas with $280,000. Daniel becoming Craig. Craig marrying Laura. Laura dying the same death, the same patient invisible death. Craig collecting again. Craig meeting Meredith. Craig sitting at my table, calling me sir, carrying my grandson on his shoulders. Measuring my daughter's death in half teaspoons at 11:19 every night. All of it traceable to one moment. One page. One signature. Written too fast by a man who should have looked 1 minute longer. Evelyn came back with 2 cups of bad coffee and the look she wears when she is about to tell me something true. The file shows your caseload that year. 341 cases, 2 pathologists short. The Galveston office was drowning in Hurricane Ike overflow. You worked 18-hour days for 7 straight months. Context, not an excuse. No, she agreed. Not an excuse. But context matters. Walter, you didn't bury evidence. You made a judgment call under conditions that would have broken any pathologist alive. The symptoms were ambiguous without a tox panel, and ordering a panel on every fatigue and neuropathy case would have collapsed a system that was already on its knees. You made the call 90% of your colleagues would have made, and a woman died because of it. Then another. And now my daughter and my grandson are being poisoned by the man I set loose with my own pen. 90% isn't good enough when the 10% is your own family. She didn't argue. She was too honest to absolve me, and too kind to confirm what we both already knew. I looked at the photograph clipped to Rebecca's file, a driver's license picture. Young, dark-haired, smiling at a camera at the DMV on some ordinary day when she had no idea she was already dying, that the man who brought her flowers was measuring her out by the spoonful. She had a sister, too. The notes mentioned a sibling who had asked questions and been waved off, the same way Diane had been waved off. The same way I had waved off the file in front of me. That night I drove home and did not turn on the radio. I stood in front of Catherine's photograph and told her the whole thing, the signature, the date, the 7 words. I waited for the voice from memory to forgive me. It didn't. Catherine never lied to make me feel better. That was Meredith's mother's one unbreakable rule. What I heard instead was the thing she would actually have said. You can't unsign it, Walter. But you can make sure it doesn't take another name. So I sat at my desk at 3 a.m. and wrote a letter I knew would never be read by the person it was for. To Rebecca Aldridge. On a Tuesday in October of 2009, I signed your death certificate with a conclusion that was wrong. I wrote natural causes because I was overworked and careless, and because your symptoms gave me an easy door to walk through. They were not ambiguous. They were arsenic, and I should have seen it. You died without justice, and your killer went free because of my hand. I cannot give you back what he took, but I can promise you this: your name will not be the last entry in his record. My daughter is alive tonight, with his poison in her blood. And this time I will not sign the easy answer. This time I will look 1 minute longer. I am sorry it took me 15 years and my own child to learn what your file tried to teach me. I set the pen down. I did not tear the page out or fold it away. I left it under the lamp, face up, where I would see it every time I passed a reminder that the man watering roses in Houston and the man who signed too fast in Galveston were the same man. And the only way to reconcile them was to finish what I should have started 15 years ago. Then I picked up the phone and called Evelyn. I'm not stopping. Not for Meredith's anger, not for Craig's performance. I have a debt with 3 names on it, and one of them is still breathing. Tell me how we put him in a cage that holds. She was quiet a moment. Then, I know, Walter, because this time you're not just saving your daughter. You're saving yourself. The FBI field office in Houston looked like every federal building in every American city, glass and concrete, and a blandness engineered to convey authority without personality. I had been inside it twice before, both times as an expert witness, lending my training to someone else's tragedy. This time the tragedy was mine, and detachment was no longer an option. Special Agent Ramirez met us in a 3rd-floor conference room. 46. Lean. The careful posture of a man trained to broadcast control through his body. Evelyn sat beside me, a professional anchor in a room that felt increasingly personal. Ramirez had inherited Craig's file 14 months earlier, when Diane's tip flagged the insurance payout. He knew the name. What he lacked was enough to act. Dr. Pennington, he said, spreading documents across the table. We've been aware of Craig Hollowell, also known as Daniel Aldridge, for over a year, but Laura's death was ruled natural by the examining pathologist, without a tox report contradicting that. We can't establish homicide as the predicate for a federal case. The examining pathologist on Rebecca Aldridge was me, I said, and the ruling was wrong. I'll put that in writing, under oath, today. He looked at me for 3 full seconds without blinking. I appreciate that. A self-corrected finding gives us grounds to reopen Rebecca's case and petition to exhume Laura. But that takes weeks. It does not, by itself, get me through your daughter's front door. I laid out the rest. Hair at 4 times threshold in Meredith. Urine at 1.5 in Owen. My own eyes on Craig at the counter. The locked drawer. The white powder. Denise Palmer's real identity as Denise Hargrove. The ex-wife who never left. And the thing Evelyn had pulled that morning, a Delaware LLC, registered 4 months ago in Meredith's maiden name, with Denise listed as the resident agent. Ramirez listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "This is compelling. It is also circumstantial. For a federal prosecution, I need direct evidence of intent. Audio, video, Craig or Denise describing the scheme in their own words. Juries don't convict sophisticated men on inference. They convict on confessions." "You want me to wear a wire," I said. "I want you to consider a controlled encounter," he corrected, with the precision of a man who had testified before oversight committees. "A setting where Craig is comfortable enough to talk. A family gathering, a holiday. Somewhere his guard is down and the conversation can drift toward money and your daughter's health." He paused. "If he names the LLC, the insurance, or his connection to Denise, we have grounds for arrest and seizure." Evelyn spoke. "The boy's birthday, October 19th, 4 weeks out, 4 weeks." I did the arithmetic before I could stop. 28 days. 28 more smoothies poured by Craig. 20 of them shared by Owen. 28 more doses sliding into my daughter's blood, building toward the number that killed Laura. "I need to warn Meredith," I said. "No." Ramirez did not soften it. "If she confronts him, he does one of 2 things. He runs, he has the identities and the cash to vanish overnight. Or worse, a cornered poisoner facing exposure stops dosing slowly and finishes the job fast. To eliminate the witness before we can move. Telling your daughter the truth right now is the single most likely way to get her killed this month." The sentence pinned me to the chair. The truth could kill her. Silence was keeping her alive. The paradox was monstrous, and it was real. I drove home that night and tried to call her anyway. The phone rang 6 times. Craig answered. "Sir, Meredith's resting rough week. The doctor adjusted her medication. She said she'll call when she's up to it." Warm. Bottomless. the performance of a devoted husband managing a fading wife. I could not tell whether my daughter was too sick to come to the phone or simply not allowed to, with Craig holding both the phone and the woman who owned it. There was no way to know. 2 days later, Evelyn called with the worst news yet. Walter, Meredith signed a financial power of attorney. Craig now has authority over the inheritance account. Signed Tuesday, notarized Wednesday, filed Thursday. A breath. He's moving fast. Faster than we projected. Under what conditions? My voice had gone flat. We don't know. She may have signed willingly, trusting her husband. She may have been too weak to refuse. Or she signed while the arsenic was already clouding her judgment, which would make the document voidable, but only if we can prove impairment at the time of signing. A pause. And there's one more thing. He increased the life insurance on Meredith. $750,000. Filed last quarter. I understood then what I was watching. Craig had felt me coming. My visit, my evidence, my hand shown too soon in that living room, it had not frightened him into retreat. It had started his clock. Power of attorney to reach the 1.1 million. The LLC to move it offshore. The insurance to pay out if the money route failed. He was tightening every knot at once. And my daughter, weakening by the day, was signing whatever he set in front of her because she trusted the hand that fed her the poison and distrusted the father trying to pull it away. I sat in the dark and looked at Catherine's photograph and at the letter to Rebecca still face up under the lamp. 2 women I had failed in 2 different ways, and one still living woman, 120 days from a grave, married to a man counting down the same clock I was, 28 days to the birthday. 28 more smoothies. 1 recorded conversation standing between my daughter and Laura's ending. I started counting the doses the way I once counted slides, knowing each one carried us closer to justice or catastrophe, and that the margin between them was now measured in a child's birthday party. Diane had told me Catherine knew, but knowing my wife had carried this alone, from a hospital bed, was different from holding the proof in my hands. And Catherine, thorough to the end, would not have carried it in her head. She would have written it down. There was only one place she could have hidden a thing she wanted Meredith to find, and no one else. The jewelry box, dark oak, brass hinges. The one Catherine left with a sticky note in her shaking hand. For Meredith, only open when she truly needs her mother. I had handed it to my daughter at the funeral, and as far as I knew, it had sat sealed on a shelf for 2 years, because grief makes you avoid the things that carry the weight of the person you lost. I knew that better than anyone. I drove to Austin on a Tuesday, when Meredith taught and the house was empty, and I let myself in with the key from the renovation year. The guilt of entering my daughter's home uninvited sat on me like wet concrete, but the guilt of doing nothing sat heavier. And between 2 guilts, a man chooses the one that might keep his child breathing. The box was on the top closet shelf, behind a stack of sweaters exactly where you put a thing you mean to face later and never do. The brass was cold. The sticky note still clung to the lid. Inside a pair of pearl earrings, A photograph of Meredith at 7 laughing on Catherine's lap, and a sealed cream envelope with Meredith's name in my wife's hand. The seal was unbroken. 2 years, and our daughter had never opened it. I opened it, and the floor shifted under me. My dearest Meredith, I am writing this because the cancer may take my voice before I can say it, and what I have to tell you cannot wait for a better moment that may never come. 8 months ago, a woman named Diane wrote to me. She said her sister Laura had been married to your husband before you. She said Laura died slowly, mysteriously, and that she believed Craig was responsible. I did not dismiss her. I am not your father. I have no laboratory. But the internet gives an ordinary woman extraordinary reach. I found the divorce record between Craig and a woman named Denise Hargrove. I found a gap in Craig's records where a clean man's history should be. I found enough to know that the man Diane buried her sister hating is the same man who married you. I sat on the edge of my daughter's bed and could not breathe. Then the letter explained the thing that had haunted me since Diane first said Catherine's name. I have not told your father, and I need you to understand why, because one day you may hate me for it. I know Walter. I love him more than I have loved any soul on this earth, and that love includes knowing exactly what he is. If I tell him, he will investigate. He will take your marriage apart with tweezers and a microscope, and he will be right. Meredith completely, forensically right, and you will hate him for it. You will call it paranoia, the way you have since you were 16. And you will choose Craig, because Craig is warm and present and your father is cold and far away. And warmth beats evidence in a daughter's heart every time. I cannot let the truth cost your father the last person he has left. I read it twice. Catherine had not just predicted the disaster, she had described it, scene by scene, before it happened. The confrontation, Meredith calling me paranoid, Craig's arm around her shoulder, all of it. She had known me to the bone, and she had chosen silence. And she had been right about everything except the one thing that mattered. She ran out of time to do it her way. The final page was an escape plan. Meredith, if you are reading this, you are in trouble, and you do not need my warnings. You need a door. Do not confront him. Do not tell him you know. Take the boys and go to your father. He will protect you with his life. Just do not ask him to investigate first. Diane's number is below. Call her. Then you will believe. I love you. And I am sorry I could not stay to do this gently. I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket. And then I noticed the thing that made the back of my neck go cold. The sweaters I had moved to reach the box were not dusty. The shelf was. There was a clean rectangle in the dust where the box had recently been lifted, set down, and pushed back not by me. Someone had already found this box, recently, and returned it. Almost exactly. The way a careful man returns a thing he does not want you to know he touched. He knew about the box. Maybe not what was inside the seal was unbroken, but he knew it existed, knew it mattered enough to check. Which meant Craig had been searching his own house for whatever his dead mother-in-law might have left behind. He was not just poisoning my daughter. He was sweeping for the very evidence I was holding. I put everything back the way I found it, down to the angle of the sweaters, and walked out with the letter against my chest like a live wire. Because I understood now what I was carrying. Not just proof that Catherine had seen the truth. A weapon the only one Craig could not gaslight, could not cross-examine, could not call paranoid. When the moment came, and Meredith had to choose between her father's word and her husband's performance, this letter would speak in the one voice she had never once doubted. Her mother's, from the other side of the grave. And there was nothing Craig could do to silence a woman already gone. I just had to keep him from finding it first. 10 days before the birthday party, I found the one piece of evidence that would have ended everything in a single afternoon. And then I deleted it with my own hands. I was on the family cloud, the shared account, where photos drift automatically off all our devices into one place. I had logged in just to see the boys' faces, to remember that under all the surveillance and forensic math, there were 2 children who deserved a grandfather and not an operative. I wanted to remember what I was protecting. I scrolled past school pictures and Halloween costumes, and then I found a folder I did not recognize. Owen's Spy Kit Project. 43 video files, created 6 weeks ago. Owen had gotten a toy spy kit for his last birthday, a plastic briefcase with a magnifying glass, invisible ink pens, and a little camera with a suction cup. He had been mounting it around the house and recording what he solemnly called surveillance, narrating in the voice of a boy who believes the world is exactly as dramatic as it feels. Most of the clips were nothing. The cat asleep on a radiator. Noah doing homework. Subject appears to be napping. Will continue monitoring. Then I opened the file dated September 23rd. The camera was stuck to the side of the refrigerator, aimed at the kitchen counter. Timestamp in the corner. Owen's voice narrated from off-screen, from the living room where he watched on the kit's little monitor. Commencing kitchen surveillance. Suspects may be preparing unauthorized snacks. At the 11-minute mark, Craig walked into frame. The timestamp read 11:07 p.m. He went to the cabinet above the refrigerator, reached behind the cereal boxes, came out with the key. He knelt, unlocked the bottom drawer, lifted the unlabeled container, unscrewed the lid, and tapped white powder into the blender twice with his index finger. His face was lit clearly by the stove light. The container was visible. The drawer was visible. The powder was visible. Continuous. Unedited. Time-stamped. 12 seconds of perfect evidence. An 8-year-old's toy had captured what weeks of professional investigation had not Craig Hollowell putting an unknown substance into his wife's food in secret. On film, a jury could not argue with. Any prosecutor in the country would have wept with gratitude. A warrant within hours. A conviction on its own. And Owen would be the boy whose camera did it. I sat staring at the screen for a long time. My grandson had filmed his stepfather poisoning his mother while playing detective, and had no idea what he held. But the world would know, in depositions, in the courtroom, in the story that would follow Craig's conviction forever. Owen would become the child who sent his father to prison. The 8-year-old whose science project was Exhibit A. I had consulted on cases with child witnesses. I had read the follow-up studies. The literature is not ambiguous. Children who become the instrument against a parent figure carry it into adulthood, the guilt, the nightmares, the unshakable, irrational certainty that they destroyed their family rather than documented it. I called Evelyn, told her what I had. She was silent a long time. Then, quietly, my daughter Caroline testified against her mother's boyfriend when she was 12. He was guilty. The jury convicted. That was 15 years ago. She's 27 now, and she's been in therapy since she was 13. She did the right thing, and it took a piece of her she never got back. A breath. Some evidence saves the case and breaks the child. Walter. The only question is whether the case is worth the child. It answered itself. No conviction was worth Owen spending his life believing the camera he mounted for fun had put his father away. No exhibit was worth the day. Years from now, when he was old enough to understand what those 12 seconds contained and realize he had been playing spy 3 feet from his mother's murder, I right-clicked the file. Delete from all devices. A box appeared. This action is permanent and cannot be undone. I looked at a photo of Owen on my phone last Christmas, gap-toothed, holding a gingerbread man so overloaded with frosting it kept collapsing in his hands, laughing every time it fell. I clicked delete. The file vanished. 12 seconds of perfect evidence, gone from every synced device, confirmed across 3 accounts. The best proof in the case, erased by the lead investigator to protect a boy who would never know what his grandfather had done, or why. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Meredith's number, but it was Craig. "Sir." His voice was tight in a way I had not heard before. "Meredith collapsed in the kitchen. We're at the hospital. They're running fluids. The doctor's talking about admitting her." A pause, and then, soft as a blade, "I just thought family should know." I sat in the dark with the dead phone in my hand and the deleted file gone past recovery, and the floor opened under me. Had I just thrown away the one thing that could have ended it tonight to spare a child a wound? While that child's mother lay in a hospital bed with the poison still climbing. For 1 black minute I was certain I had killed her to protect his innocence. Then the cold returned, and with it the discipline. A collapse was not the end. Laura had declined over 5 months. Meredith was at 4. This was a scare, not the finish. And a hospital, ironically, was the safest place she could be away from his kitchen, his blender, his locked drawer. Craig had called me himself, performing the devoted husband even now, narrating his alarm to his audience of 1. I called Evelyn. "She's in the hospital," and I deleted the only clean evidence we had. I waited for her to tell me I was a fool. She didn't. She said, "Then we have 1 shot. The birthday, the wire. 1 conversation, and no safety net." A pause. "You chose the hard road." "Walter, some roads are hard because they're right," I said. "And some evidence costs too much to use. 10 days to the party. No backup. Just an old man, a microphone, and 4 words that would either save my family or lose all of it." They discharged Meredith after 2 days. "Stabilized," they said. "Fluids. Rest. A tweak to her medication." They sent her home back to the kitchen, the blender, the locked drawer, the husband who had called me to perform his worry from the waiting room. A hospital had been the safest place she had been in months, and they handed her back to the man emptying her out a half teaspoon at a time. I sat in my car in the parking garage and did the only thing left to do. I started getting ready to wear a wire to a children's birthday party. Agent Ramirez met me in a motel room off I-35 halfway between our lives. The recording device was smaller than I expected, a flat disc the size of a quarter, flesh-colored, that the technician fixed to the skin between my fourth and fifth ribs with surgical adhesive, and the focused expression of a man wiring something that could go off, which, in a sense, he was. 12-foot radius, broadcast quality, Ramirez said. It transmits live to a van we'll have parked a block north. Me, 2 techs, and a federal prosecutor who signed off this morning. He looked at me the way you look at a civilian about to do a professional's job. Your only task is to keep him talking about money and her health. Get him to name the LLC, the insurance, or Denise. The law does the rest. You do not improvise. You do not accuse. You let a comfortable man brag in his own kitchen. He ran me through elicitation for an hour how to ask a question that sounds like admiration, how to leave a silence a vain man feels compelled to fill, how to never, ever let my face do what my chest was doing. By the end, I understood the cruelest part of the plan. To save my daughter, I would have to sit across from the man killing her and make him feel safe. One more thing, Ramirez said, packing the case. If at any point he finds the device, you do nothing. You don't run. You don't fight. You're a confused old man who got talked into something by the FBI, and you're scared. We extract you. Understand a cornered poisoner is unpredictable. And you are 68 years old. I understood. I also knew I would not run, whatever happened. I had run once before in 2009 when I signed and turned to the next file. I was done running. I called Meredith that night. To my surprise, she answered. Her voice was thin, far away, but it was hers. Dad. A long pause. Craig said you came by the house while I was teaching. My blood went cold. He said the front door was unlocked when he got home. He wanted to change the locks. I told him not to. I said you probably just checked on things, so Craig had felt me in the house. Not the letter, the seal had been unbroken. The box returned to its angle, but my presence. The unlocked door. He was sweeping for intruders now, and I was the intruder. I kept my voice gentle. I missed you. I won't come by unannounced again. A lie that cost me nothing and bought me everything it told Craig I had backed off. It told him I was a chastened, lonely old man, exactly what I needed him to believe 10 days out. Will you come to the boys' party? She asked. And there was something underneath the fatigue, something that had not been there since the day she threw me out. A small, frightened note. Owen keeps asking. He says you promised. I promised, I said. I'll be there. 2 days before the party, the plan nearly died. Evelyn called at midnight. Denise filed an emergency amendment to the LLC this afternoon. She moved the resident agent off her own name onto a registered agent service in Wyoming, and the inheritance account Craig initiated a wire transfer request. Pending. $300,000 to an account we can't see yet. A breath. Walter, they're not waiting for the slow plan anymore. They're cleaning up. People clean up right before they finish. Or right before they run. Right before they finish. Or run. Either way, the 11:19 routine and the half teaspoon were no longer the threat. The threat was that by the time I sat down at that party with a microphone on my ribs, there might be nothing left to record a husband who had already drained the accounts and a wife the doctors were calling stable. Declining quietly toward a grave everyone would mistake for natural. "Can we move the party up?" Ramirez asked when I called him. "It's a children's birthday. 8 9-year-olds and a bouncy castle. We can't move it. We hit it on the 19th or we lose the setting." I closed my eyes. If he says one wrong word before then, we go in early and we go in light. But the party is the shot. He'll be relaxed. He'll have an audience. He'll want to perform what a good husband he is in front of the one man who could prove he isn't. There was a long silence on the line. Then Ramirez said the thing I had been refusing to say out loud. "Dr. Pennington, if this goes sideways at that party, if he reads your face, if the boy bumps the mic, if anything, we will have shown our entire hand to a man with cash and clean identities. And your daughter will be alone in a house with him that night, knowing the truth, with no charge filed. You understand what that means." I understood. It meant one conversation, no video, no backup, a microphone, a dead woman's letter in my jacket, and 4 words. I drove to the party site the next morning, just to see it the house with balloons already going up in the window. Blue and green. Owen's colors. A banner I could read from the street. "Happy birthday, Owen and Noah." Somewhere inside, my daughter was resting between the man who fed her poison and the woman who delivered it on Thursdays. Both of them tidying the money like people who knew the end was near. They thought the clock was theirs. In 2 days, I was going to walk into that house and start it ticking the other way. The disc against my ribs pressed harder every time I breathed. I wore a shirt 1 size too large so the adhesive would not print through the fabric. And I stood on my daughter's porch at 8:45 in the morning, listening to my own heart broadcast live to a plumber's van parked 1 block north. Craig opened the door before I knocked, as if he had been at the window. "Sir, big day. The boys are wired." He smiled. The irony of the word was perfect and invisible to him. I shook his hand and wondered if he could feel my pulse hammering through my palm. Owen hit me at waist level. "Grandpa, you came." He wrapped himself around me, and the disc shifted under my shirt as he squeezed. And for 1 airless second, I felt the edge of it catch against his cheek through the cotton. He pulled back, rubbed his face absently, and looked up. "You're all bony there, Grandpa." The kitchen went quiet in my head, though the room kept moving. Craig glanced over, mildly. I patted my own chest. "Old man's got a heart monitor these days. Buddy, doctor's orders. Don't tell anybody I'm vain." I winked. Owen giggled, delighted to share a secret, and ran off to the bouncy castle. Craig's eyes lingered half a second longer than they should have, then let it go. A heart monitor on a 68-year-old was the most boring thing in the world. I had hidden the truth inside the last thing a younger man bothers to suspect age. By 11, 8 children from Owen's class filled the backyard with the serious business of celebration. A bouncy castle. A dinosaur cake with 9 unlit candles. Meredith sat in a lawn chair in the sun, too tired to join in, but smiling each time Owen waved from the top of the castle like a conqueror. When Denise arrived at 9:30 with a tray of fruit cups and a pitcher of natural electrolyte water for the children, I intercepted Owen's cup with a sealed juice box I had carried in. "Try Grandpa's, buddy." Denise's hand paused over the pitcher for a fraction of a second, a hesitation only a man trained to read micro-behavior would catch. I caught it. She caught me catching it. We smiled at each other like two people holding the same knife. By 1:15 the other children were gone. The boys went back to the castle. Meredith dozed. The house emptied to 4 adults. Craig, Denise, my drowsing daughter, and me and I began. "Craig," I said, settling into a kitchen chair with a casualness I had rehearsed 17 times in my bathroom mirror. "Meredith mentioned you've been reorganizing the family finances, consolidating the inheritance into something more efficient. How's that coming?" He leaned against the counter, weight on one hip, the posture of a man invited to discuss his expertise. "Really well. Actually, I set up an LLC through Delaware. Better tax exposure, better asset protection. Meredith signed the operating agreement last month. Denise has been handling the filing." Denise nodded from across the kitchen. "Single-member LLC. Craig as managing member. Meredith as sole owner on paper. On paper. 2 words. Broadcasting to a van 1 block north." I let them hang. Then asked, gently, like a man too old to do math, "What's the total you're working with?" She wasn't clear on the numbers. Craig did not hesitate. 1.1 from the inheritance, plus the insurance, which we bumped to $750 last quarter. The LLC keeps both pools clean, separate from the household. A small, somber pause. "Better for estate planning. Honestly. If anything ever happens to Meredith's health, if anything happens to Meredith's health," he said it the way you say if it rains. He was the weather. He was the rain. And he had just named the LLC. The inheritance, the inflated policy, and Denise's role on a federal recording, while his stepson bounced in a castle 30 feet away. I needed one more brick, not the structure, the intent. "The insurance increase," I said. "Your idea, or hers?" "Mine." He smiled, modest. "She doesn't like morbid topics. But with the fatigue getting worse and no diagnosis, I thought it was prudent." Denise agreed. "If her condition deteriorates, the family needs to be protected. It should stabilize within 6 months on my regimen," Denise added smoothly. "But until then, the increase is just responsible planning." Craig thinks ahead. Thinks ahead. 6 months. Stabilize. They were laying their own bricks, voluntarily. Certain the old man at the table was a harmless retiree with a heart monitor and a juice box. In the van 1 block north, a federal prosecutor was listening to a husband describe, in his own words, the financial machine he had built on his wife's slow death. I had the money. I had the LLC. I had Denise. I had Craig connecting the policy to Meredith's deteriorating health in his own mouth. What I did not have, yet, was the thing that would make my daughter believe it. A husband can describe an LLC, and a frightened wife will call it love and planning. I had the case Ramirez needed. I did not yet have the case Meredith needed. For that, I would have to change the game. I reached into my jacket past the wire, past the years, past everything I had ever failed to say 1 minute longer, and my fingers closed around a cream-colored envelope in my dead wife's hand. On the patio, Meredith stirred and opened her eyes. I laid 4 documents on the kitchen table. Between the cake crumbs and the half-empty lemonade, Rebecca Aldridge's death certificate, 2009. Laura Hollowell's, 2021. A facial recognition match, Daniel Aldridge and Craig Hollowell. The same face. 2 names, and the Delaware filing with Denise Hargrove's real name on it. Each page landed with the soft sound of a door closing. Craig's eyes moved across them, and his face changed in stages confusion, then recognition as he found his own face on the printout, then calculation. A building does not fall all at once. It transfers its weight from the failing supports to the ones still standing, until the geometry of staying upright becomes impossible. Daniel, I said, quietly. The way you use a scalpel not with force, but precisely, where the tissue is thinnest. His jaw tightened. 1 second. 2. Then the performance came back online, not the devoted husband now, but the cornered professional, pivoting from charm to damage control with the fluency of a man who had planned for this room. Sir, I don't know what this is, but you're confused. These aren't what you think. I can explain everything. Then explain, I said. On the record, for everyone listening, his eyes dropped to my chest, to the shirt 1 size too large, to the place over my ribs where a child's hug had caught the edge of something. I watched the understanding arrive like a sunrise, gradual, then total. You're recording this. I am. Denise stood. Her face had gone white. Craig. A warning. He ignored her and turned to the patio. Meredith. Babe. Come inside. The voice. The warm one. The one that had run my daughter's life for 6 years. She rose, holding the chair, and came in, and looked from the documents to Craig to me. What's going on? He put his arm around her and reached, one last time, for the brick he had been laying since that kitchen morning. Your father's having an episode, babe. He broke into our house. He stole your hair and sent it to a lab. And now he's wearing a wire to your son's birthday party. This is exactly what I warned you about. The paranoia. I told you it was getting worse. It was a good move. It had worked before. Catherine had predicted, word for word, that it would. And so I did the one thing Craig could not gaslight, could not cross-examine, could not call paranoid. I took the cream envelope from my jacket and set it on the table. This is from your mother, I said. She wrote it before she died. She left it in the box you never opened. Meredith stared at the handwriting. Her hand moved toward it, the way a hand moves toward something that might burn. She picked it up, recognized the script, and opened it. The kitchen held its breath. The refrigerator hummed. Through the walls came the muffled laughter of 2 boys in a bouncy castle, oblivious, alive. Meredith read for 2 minutes that lasted a lifetime. I watched her shoulders change, the tension that had been aimed at me, the daughter shielding her husband from her paranoid father, rotated, slowly, and turned toward the man whose arm was still around her. She looked up from her mother's letter, and she looked at Craig the way a daughter looks through her dead mother's eyes at a man Catherine had named, from the grave, as the thing that was killing her. What did you do? 3 words. Her voice did not tremble. It had moved past trembling into something forged. Craig's arm dropped. The performance could not hold against Catherine's voice, a woman beyond reach, beyond manipulation, with no reason to lie and no vulnerability to charm. Meredith, your mother was sick, on medication. She didn't know what she was writing. My mother knew your real name. Meredith held up the page. She knew about Denise. She knew about Laura. She wrote it all down because she knew I wouldn't believe my father. She was right about that. Her eyes did not leave him. She was right about all of it. She stepped away from him, toward me. The geometry of the room shifted, a triangle collapsing into a line. Meredith and me on one side, Craig and Denise on the other, and I said the 4 words I had carried for 3 weeks, rehearsed in the dark, tested against the silence of a photograph. For the record, sir, 90 seconds. The front door opened with the sound of a federal master key. Ramirez first, badge up, 4 agents behind him in vests. Craig Hollowell, also known as Daniel Aldridge, you're under arrest. Denise Hargrove, you're under arrest. Charges include wire fraud, conspiracy, identity fraud, and suspicion of homicide. Craig did not run. He stood very still while the cuffs closed, and he looked at me not with rage, not with fear, but with the flat recognition of a man acknowledging he had underestimated his opponent. Denise said nothing, her face a rehearsed blank. From the backyard, through the open door, Owen's voice. Grandpa, why are there police at my birthday? I knelt on the patio and pulled him close, felt his heartbeat against mine, rapid and small and alive. Everything's okay, buddy. Grandpa's here. Everything's going to be okay. That was the day it ended. Craig Hollowell, born Daniel Aldridge, would be charged across 3 states. They would exhume Rebecca in Galveston and Laura in San Antonio, and both would come back the same arsenic, exactly as I had failed to see in 2009 and could not unsee in 2025. The myocarditis on Laura's certificate would be struck. The natural causes on Rebecca's would be struck, and beside my old signature, a new line forensic error identified and corrected by the originating pathologist. Not absolution, but correction. Denise would take a plea, and Craig would receive the one sentence that fit a man who marries the trusting and measures out their deaths by the spoonful life. Without the possibility of parole, my daughter would live. My grandson would live. I held Owen on the patio while 2 cars carried his stepfather and his nurse away in opposite directions, and the candles on the dinosaur cake stood unlit. And I believed, for one breath, that the worst was behind us. I was wrong. There was one more file I had not yet read, and it was the one that would break me. 3 days after the arrest, I sat in a room at the FBI field office and read the file that I had been spared until then. The digital team had pulled it from Craig's laptop, from a folder labeled, with banal cruelty, tax archives. It was a spreadsheet. 2 columns. The first was headed M. The second, O. Meredith and Owen. Each column listed dates, doses in milligrams, and notes written with the detachment of a technician monitoring an experiment. The M column read like a chart kept by a patient's executioner. Fatigue increasing. Neuropathy confirmed. Reduced mobility this week. Good. The O column was shorter, the doses smaller. Secondary subject responding on curve. Adjust upward next cycle. I scrolled to the bottom of the O column. 5 words and a number. Stopped my heart the way a hand stops a clock. Policy active. 500,000. Beneficiary C. H. timeline 14 to 18 months. He had taken out a life insurance policy on Owen. $500,000 on a boy who had just turned 9. And the timeline was not when the policy matured. It was when the child would die 14 to 18 months of carefully measured arsenic, slow enough that doctors would blame the same nameless illness that took his mother. 2 payouts, 1 grieving widower, an empty house. I set the laptop down and walked into the hallway and leaned against the wall under a humming fluorescent light. And I wept the way you weep when the thing you feared turns out to be smaller than the thing you never thought to fear. For weeks I had been terrified he would kill my daughter. I had never let myself imagine that the man who flipped pancakes on Saturdays and captioned photos my little man was calculating, in a column, how many months it would take to murder that child for money. Evelyn found me there. She did not speak. She put her hand on my shoulder until the shaking stopped, and then she said, "You saw the lines on her fingernails, and you refused to look away. Owen is alive because of 1 minute you finally took. The minute you didn't take in 2009, you gave it back. 6 months later, June, Houston, 6:15 in the morning. I stood in the backyard with the garden hose, and I was not alone. Owen held the nozzle, aiming at Catherine's red roses with the concentration of a boy entrusted with something important. Noah knelt by the white ones with a watering can, a dinosaur book wedged under his arm. The gray was gone from Owen's skin. His eyes were clear. He was 9 years old and growing in his grandmother's garden, and he would never know what those 12 seconds on a toy camera contained, or what a column in a spreadsheet had planned for him. Some protections work best when the protected never learn they were needed. Meredith came out carrying 2 mugs of coffee. 3 months of treatment had left her thin, but her hands were steady now, and her eyes were her own. She had taken a teaching job 12 minutes from my house. 12 minutes. The same number that once measured our phone calls now measured the distance between our front doors. She handed me a mug and leaned against my shoulder, and the weight of her was the most important evidence I have ever held. "Dad," she said, "I love you." I set down the coffee. I looked at her, at Owen spraying the hose too high and laughing when the water arced over the fence, at Noah reading between pores, at Catherine's roses climbing the trellis my wife had built and called not leaning, but reaching. "I love you too, Meredith." The first time in 40 years. 3 words. In a garden. At dawn. Not because I had never felt them, because my whole life I had believed that providing was the same as saying, that paying the mortgage and fixing what was broken were the words. They are not. Catherine knew that. Meredith's mother died still trying to teach it to me. And I was 68 years old, standing in wet grass with a garden hose, finally learning that the most important thing a man can leave on the record is not forensic. It is 4 words, spoken out loud, while the people you love are still close enough to hear them. So let me say the thing this whole story is really about, before I let you go. Somewhere out there is a person you have always meant to call, a parent, a child, A brother you stopped speaking to over something neither of you can quite remember. You have told yourself there will be time. You have told yourself they already know. I told myself both of those things for 40 years. And I came within 4 words and a few months of standing over my daughter's grave with all of it still unsaid. Do not wait for a deathbed letter to say it for you. Do not let the translator die before the message gets through. If someone came to mind while you listened to this, call them. Today. Tell them you love them. Out loud. In your own voice. While they can still hear it. The roses needed water. They always do. But this morning, for the first time in 4 years, watering them did not feel like tending a grave. It felt like growing something new.